Welcome to the deep dive. We're really diving deep today, going way back to the American Revolution and all those events that ultimately led to the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, yeah.
You've given us some really incredible source materials, Tom.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff.
Excerpts from the Declaration itself.
Yeah.
We have some sections of Thomas Paine's Common Sense and a few study guides, too, just to set the scene for us.
It's really interesting to look at this period because, it wasn't just like a sudden rebellion. It was more like a slow burn.
Right.
A lot of British policies just kind of, one after another, they just chipped away at the colonists' sense of loyalty to the crown.
It's true.
Pushed them to that breaking point.
Okay, so let's set the stage here.
Okay.
Paint us a picture of what life was like in the colonies before all this tension started to erupt.
Okay.
Like pre-1763, what was it like?
So life in the colonies before 1763 was surprisingly autonomous.
Really?
Yeah. Imagine, vast stretches of land, a growing sense of community, this real spirit of self-reliance. They were loyal to the crown,
Right.
but they were used to governing themselves. They had their own assemblies, made their own laws. They enjoyed a good deal of freedom.
Yeah.
But that sense of autonomy was about to be challenged, and the French and Indian War was a real turning point.
War that changed everything.
It did. It was a costly victory for Britain.
Yeah.
And they really felt the colonists should help to shoulder some of that financial burden.
Right.
And so that's where the trouble began, with a series of acts that were designed to raise revenue.
And those acts were met with a lot of resistance, right?
Absolutely.
Because the colonists were already kind of wary of British interference, I would think.
Yeah, they were fiercely independent, and they were really protective of their rights as Englishmen. They believed in no taxation without representation, meaning they shouldn't be subjected to taxes imposed by Parliament where they had no voice.
Right. It's like having to pay for a party you weren't invited to plan.
Exactly. And the first major blow to that sense of fairness was the Stamp Act of 1765.
Oh, the Stamp Act.
So imagine this. Every piece of printed material you touched required a stamp.
Oh, wow.
Legal documents, newspapers,
Really?
even playing cards.
Wow.
This direct tax on the colonists just sparked outrage.
I can only imagine it must just felt like a constant reminder of British control.
Yeah, it was a direct challenge to their autonomy and their economic freedom. The cry of no taxation without representation echoed throughout the colonies.
Yeah.
And it really united them in opposition.
So the Stamp Act really kind of ignited that flame of resistance.
It did, and while it was eventually repealed due to colonial pressure, Britain hadn't abandoned the idea of taxing the colonies. So instead of backing down, they introduced the Townshend Acts in 1767.
So instead of one big obvious tax, they went for a series of smaller, sneakier ones.
Yeah, you could say that the Townshend Acts imposed taxes on everyday imports. Things like tea glass and lead, hoping to raise revenue more subtly. But the colonists were savvy.
Yeah.
They found ways to resist. They boycotted British goods.
Wow.
And even resorted to smuggling to avoid these taxes.
That's amazing. They just refused to be bullied into submission.
Yeah, and this back and forth between British control and colonial defiance just continued to escalate.
Right.
The colonists were feeling increasingly marginalized and unheard.
Of course.
And then came the Tea Act of 1773.
Oh.
Yeah, and this pushed them closer to the brink.
The Tea Act.
Yeah.
This was about more than just tea, I have a feeling.
It was. It wasn't just about raising revenue. It was a power play.
Okay.
It gave the British East India Company a monopoly on tea.
Wow.
Allowed them to undercut colonial merchants.
Oh, no.
Control the colonial economy, and this directly threatened the livelihoods of colonial businesses.
So it was like a double blow. It was economic control and a sense of betrayal from the crown.
Exactly. The colonists felt betrayed by a government that was supposed to protect their interests.
Right.
Imagine having your livelihood threatened by policies that are imposed from afar with no say in the matter.
I wouldn't stand for it.
And neither did the colonists.
And that's where we get the Boston Tea Party.
Right? The Boston Tea Party was a dramatic act of protest.
Right.
It really symbolized the colonists' growing frustration and their willingness to resist.
Yeah.
It was a turning point. And the British response to this act of defiance was swift and harsh.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and it further fueled those flames of revolution.
So the British response was that what we've read about as the Intolerable Acts.
You got it. Okay.
The British were determined to assert their authority, and they enacted the course of acts in 1774, which the colonists aptly dubbed the Intolerable Acts.
Right.
These acts were designed to punish Massachusetts,
Yeah.
particularly Boston, for the Tea Party. Okay, so break it down for our listeners. What exactly made them so intolerable?
Okay, imagine this, the bustling port of Boston, the heart of colonial trade.
Yeah.
Shut down.
Oh, wow.
Town meetings essential for colonial self-governance were banned.
Really?
And the Quartering Act, which required colonists to house British troops, was expanded.
Oh, so they were essentially being occupied.
Yeah.
By a force they saw as hostile.
Pretty much.
That's adding insult to injury.
It is.
Not only were their liberties restricted,
Yeah.
they had to provide for the very troops that were sent to punish them.
It's true, and as if that wasn't enough, they also passed the Quebec Act, which granted land to Quebec that the colonists had fought for in the French and Indian War.
Oh, wow.
This just added another layer of resentment, further alienating the colonists from the crown.
Wow. These acts meant to stifle dissent seem to have had the opposite effect.
They did.
It's like pouring gasoline on an already smoldering fire.
You're absolutely right. The Intolerable Acts, instead of isolating Massachusetts, actually galvanized the colonies. The other colonies saw what was happening to Massachusetts as a threat to their own freedom.
It's true.
And a sense of unity began to emerge.
Wow.
They realized that if the British could do this to one colony, they could do it to any of them.
So these policies backfired spectacularly.
They did.
And drove the colonies closer together.
They did, and that growing sense of unity, coupled with the increasing influence of revolutionary ideas, really created the perfect storm for a full-blown rebellion.
Right, and one of the most powerful voices fueling that rebellion was Thomas Paine.
Absolutely.
Right.
Paine's Common Sense, published in early 1776, was like a lightning strike to public opinion.
Wow.
Powerful arguments for independence.
Yeah.
Resonated deeply with the colonists.
So Paine kind of provided that intellectual and emotional fuel.
Yes.
While the British policies were providing the grievances.
Yeah.
This is where things get really interesting.
It is. We've set the stage, the tension is building, and the colonists are ready for change. But how did they translate all that anger and those revolutionary ideas into action?
Right.
Well, that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive. Welcome back to our deep dive into the American Revolution.
Oh, it's good to be back.
So when we left off, the colonies were really like on the brink of rebellion, fueled by, all those grievances against the British crown.
Yeah, those British policies really backfired.
They did.
Trying to assert control.
Yeah.
But ended up pushing the colonies toward independence.
Classic example of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And speaking of consequences, one of the most significant outcomes of this period was, the Declaration of Independence.
Ah, yes, the Declaration.
A bold statement.
More than just a historical document, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's like a living, breathing testament to the power of ideas.
Yeah, it's a philosophical treatise
on
the very nature of government and the rights of the governed.
Yeah.
Carefully crafted with a structure that just builds its argument step by step.
Okay, so let's break it down for our listener. Yeah. What's the first part?
So it starts with a preamble. A statement of purpose.
Okay.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
Yeah.
That sets the stage for the entire document.
It's like the opening notes of a powerful symphony.
It is.
But what exactly makes them so self-evident?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The Declaration is arguing that certain rights are inherent to all human beings, not granted by any king or government.
Right.
It states that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights.
Hold on. Let's pause there for a second.
Okay.
Unalienable rights.
Yes.
A concept that's so central to the Declaration.
Yes.
And an idea that still resonates so much today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Unalienable means that these rights cannot be taken away or surrendered.
Right.
They're fundamental to human existence.
Yeah.
They're woven into the very fabric of our being. And the Declaration goes on to list these rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
There it is.
That line.
It's so famous.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we forget the context.
I agree.
It's not just a feel-good phrase.
No.
It's a revolutionary statement.
It is.
That asserts these fundamental rights of every individual.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
It goes on to outline the purpose of government.
Okay.
It argues that governments are instituted to secure these rights.
Right.
That's the social contract.
So the government's job is to protect those unalienable rights.
Yes.
Not to infringe upon them.
Correct.
But what happens if a government fails to uphold that contract?
The Declaration addresses that too.
Okay.
And this is where things get really radical.
Yeah.
It states that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
It is.
The Declaration is basically saying that people have the right to overthrow a government that doesn't protect their fundamental rights.
It was a revolutionary concept.
It's incredible.
Complete rejection of the idea that kings ruled by divine rights.
Yeah.
And this idea that power ultimately resides in the people has inspired revolutions and movements for freedom.
It's amazing.
Around the world.
No wonder it's considered such a cornerstone of democracy.
Right.
So the Declaration establishes these broad principles of, individual rights, the role of government, but also gets very specific, right?
You're right.
Yeah.
The Declaration isn't just about lofty ideals.
Right.
It's also a practical document that lays out a very specific case against British rule. The bulk of the Declaration is actually a list of grievances against King George III and the British Parliament.
So this is where the rubber meets the road.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just philosophy.
Right.
It's a detailed indictment of British policies
Yeah.
and how they violated those very principles the Declaration just laid out precisely.
Okay.
The Declaration lists 27 grievances, and they cover a range of issues, all of which echo those tensions we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
They detail how the British government obstructed colonial trade, imposed taxes without colonial consent, deprived colonists of trial by jury, and even quartered troops among them.
It's like they're saying, look, King George, here's a list of all the ways you broke the social contract.
It is, and it's a powerful indictment.
Yeah.
Because it links those abstract principles of the preamble to concrete actions that directly harmed the colonists.
Yeah.
It shows how the British government systematically violated the rights of its colonial subjects, pushing them to the breaking point.
So they laid out these universal principles.
Yeah.
And then provided concrete examples of how those principles were violated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It moves from the general to the particular, building this powerful case for independence.
And it doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
Right.
After listing their grievances, they formally declare their separation from Great Britain.
Right.
They state, these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states.
Wow. It's a bold and unequivocal statement.
It is Declaration of Self-Determination.
Yeah.
This is the moment a new nation is born.
Wow.
But declaring independence was just the first step.
Right.
Declaring independence was one thing.
Yeah.
But securing it would require a long and bloody struggle.
That's true.
But the Declaration served as this powerful rallying cry for the colonists.
Yeah.
A beacon of hope for those who yearned for freedom.
And they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor.
They did.
To that fight.
Yes.
That's an incredible level of commitment.
It is. The Declaration gave them something to fight for.
Right.
A vision of a future where they could govern themselves based on those principles of liberty and equality.
Right. So from the Stamp Act to the Tea Party, from common sense to the Declaration itself, we've really traced the path that led the colonies to this pivotal moment.
We have.
The birth of a new nation.
Yes.
But what about the legacy of the Declaration?
Right.
How did this document continue to shape American history?
Yeah.
And even inspire those movements for freedom around the world?
Yeah, that's where we'll pick up in part 3 of our deep dive.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the American Revolution.
Yeah. It's been a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
We've gone from taxes on tea to a full-blown revolution.
That's right.
We've seen how those British policies just fueled that colonial anger.
How the ideas of Thomas Paine helped to ignite a movement.
Yeah.
And we've even explored the Declaration of Independence itself.
Right.
You know, that bold statement of freedom and self-determination.
Absolutely.
It's been fascinating to trace this whole evolution.
It has.
And to see how all these events and ideas kind of converge to create this pivotal moment in history.
Yes, and now as we kind of approach the end of our deep dive, it's time to consider the lasting legacy of the Declaration.
Yeah, because it's more than just a historical artifact, isn't it?
It is.
It's a document that still speaks to us today.
Yeah.
That still has the power to inspire.
Absolutely.
And to challenge us.
The Declaration of Independence isn't just about the birth of a nation.
Right.
It's about these enduring principles. You know, individual liberty, self-government, the right of people to hold their leaders accountable.
That's true.
These ideas have reverberated through history, influencing countless movements for freedom and equality.
It's like a blueprint for freedom, a guide for those seeking to create a more just and equitable society.
Think about those core principles we discussed. You know, all men are created equal, unalienable rights, the right to alter or abolish a destructive government.
Yeah.
These ideas have resonated far beyond the borders of the United States.
That's true.
Inspiring revolutions and reforms.
It's amazing.
Across the globe.
To think about how those words, penned over 2 centuries ago, continue to echo through time.
It's true.
Giving a voice to those demanding, dignity.
Yeah.
Respect a voice in their own governance.
Absolutely. And the Declaration's legacy isn't just global.
Yeah.
It's deeply embedded in the fabric of American society.
Yeah.
You know, it's a living document, constantly being reinterpreted and applied to new challenges and new contexts. Think about, the movements for civil rights, women's suffrage, LGBTQ plus equality.
Yeah.
They all draw inspiration from the ideals that are enshrined in the Declaration.
It's like each generation finds new meaning in those words.
Yeah.
Applying them to their own struggles.
Exactly.
For a more just and inclusive society.
And that's what makes the Declaration such a powerful document. It's not, just a static set of rules.
Yeah.
It's a set of principles that can guide us as we grapple with these questions of freedom, equality, the role of government in our lives.
Yeah.
It reminds us that, the pursuit of a more perfect union is an ongoing process, a journey that requires constant vigilance and a willingness to challenge injustice wherever we find it.
It challenges us, I think, to confront that gap between those lofty ideals expressed in the Declaration.
I agree.
And the realities of our world.
Absolutely.
We still have work to do to ensure that those principles of liberty and equality are fully realized.
I agree.
So,
it's a reminder that freedom isn't a destination. It's a journey.
It's true.
The struggle for equality and justice continues.
Yeah.
And the Declaration remains this powerful touchstone in that fight.
This deep dive has really driven home the point that ideas have power.
They do.
Ideas can spark revolutions. They can topple empires. They can inspire generations to fight for a better world.
That's right. And the journey from, British policies to the Declaration shows that change is possible.
Yeah.
But it requires courage, conviction.
Right.
A willingness to stand up for what you believe in.
Yeah.
It's a story that reminds us that ordinary people armed with a powerful idea can make a difference.
It's true.
It's really been an incredible journey.
Yes.
Exploring those pivotal events and ideas that led to the birth of a nation.
It really has.
But we want to leave you with something to ponder.
Okay.
The Declaration talks about unalienable rights.
Right.
Those inherent rights that can't be taken away.
Right.
But who gets to define what those rights are?
That's a great question.
And how do we balance individual liberty with the needs of society as a whole?
Yeah, those are questions that continue to be debated today. Questions that I think lie at the heart of what it means to live in a free society.
I agree.
And we encourage you to explore these questions, to engage in thoughtful dialogue.
Yes.
And to continue that never-ending pursuit.
Absolutely.
Of a more perfect union.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the American Revolution.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you've gained some new insights into this pivotal period in history, and that you'll continue to explore that complex and enduring legacy of the Declaration of Independence.
It's an amazing document.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the ideas that shape our world